Chapter 13, the hormonal regulation of homeostasis. A disorder of the endocrine system caused this kid to turn into this kid. This is called Cushing's syndrome and is caused by the overproduction of certain adrenal hormones. Andre the Giant suffered from an endocrine disorder, the same disorder that turned this lady to this and to this. It's a condition called acromegaly, or more commonly gigantism, and is caused by the overproduction of HGH, or human growth hormone. Hormones can be best described as chemical messengers, released into the body's bloodstream on demand from glands. The glands shown here are some of the ones we will discuss. The hypothalamus is the gland that serves as the interface between the central nervous system and the endocrine system. It releases hormones directly or pipes them through the nearby pituitary for release from the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, the so-called master gland, secretes tropic hormones from its anterior lobe that target other glands to release their hormones. The thyroid releases thyroxine after stimulation by the thyroid-stimulating hormone from the pituitary. Thyroxine regulates the body's metabolism. The parathyroid, not shown here, are glands embedded in the thyroid that secrete antagonistic hormones that regulate calcium levels in the blood. Antagonistic hormones have exactly opposite function. That is, one hormone increases calcium levels in the blood, the other decreases calcium levels. Another gland that secretes antagonistic hormones is the islets of Langerhans found in the pancreas. These regulate sugar levels in the blood. Adrenal glands, actually two glands, one inside the other. The adrenal medulla on the inside is stimulated directly by the nervous system for fast-acting responses such as the fight or flight response, since hormone-mediated responses, though longer-lasting, are slower to initiate. The adrenal cortex on the outside releases hormones in response to pituitary hormones. The testes and ovaries release hormones, but we will pay special attention to them when we do the unit on human reproduction. The labeled glands not being discussed in this course are the pineal and thymus glands. The pineal gland produces the hormone melatonin in the dark, but not in the light, that modulates wake and sleep patterns and seasonal functions, and in some vertebrates sexual development, hibernation, and seasonal breeding. Disorders of this gland can make people sad, seasonal affective disorder. The thymus gland is the site of T-cell maturation, where T-cells acquire their ability to genetically rearrange to adapt to pathogens. Problems of the thymus have been linked to autoimmune disorders and immunodeficiency. So the endocrine glands secrete chemical messengers called hormones. Glands and hormones comprise the endocrine system. Two types of glands, endocrine and exocrine. Exocrine glands discharge their cargo into ducts that channel it to a specific site, like the pancreatic duct that delivers digestive enzymes made from the exocrine tissue of the pancreas to the small intestine. Endocrine glands discharge their cargo, hormones, directly into the blood and end up all over the body. The hormone-producing cells of the gland are surrounded by capillaries. Hormones are delivered to target cells via the bloodstream. Target cells are specially equipped by having receptors specific to that hormone when the hormone binds to that receptor. Target cells are specially equipped by having receptors specific to that hormone. When the hormone binds to that receptor, the hormone-receptor complex affects change in that cell. The hormones can either affect cell function by moving into the cell to bind to the receptor or attach to the receptor on the membrane surface and affect change within remotely. The hormone attaching to its receptor is like the lock and key model of enzymes and substrates. You're expected to know and memorize the table of glands, hormones, and hormone effects as shown in Table 13.1 on page 440 of your text. Hormones are classified as lipid-soluble or water-soluble. Lipid-soluble, like steroids, pass through the cell membrane to reach its receptor. Water-soluble attach to receptors on the cell membrane surface. Hormones keep the body's homeostatic balance by adjusting the internal environment according to the nervous system's interpretation of the external environment. This harmony between the nervous system and the endocrine system provided some conceptual overlap. The distinction is further blurred by the fact that some neurotransmitters act as hormones, released from axon terminals into the circulatory system to find target cells, for example the hypothalamus, and the release of endorphins. Some chemicals can be neurotransmitters and hormones depending on the part of the body. For example, oxytocin is a hormone that stimulates uterine contraction during childbirth, and as a neurotransmitter in the brain, it promotes pair bonding following an orgasm. Incidentally, oxytocin as a neurotransmitter is released without orgasm when you take the street drug ecstasy. Both the nervous system and the endocrine system are regulated by feedback loops. If too much of a hormone is being produced, the high concentration of that hormone in the blood shuts down its production. This is called a negative feedback loop. The connected circulatory systems of 2 rats revealed the presence of testicular hormones in the castrated rat with a pituitary gland, and pituitary hormones in the testicularly intact rat were present even after removal of its pituitary gland. Challenges associated with this kind of research involves the fact that the job of one hormone can be assumed by another hormone from another gland, testosterone in the testes, and androgens in the adrenal glands, for example. And some glands produce more than one hormone, pituitary gland, for example, and the ovaries and the thyroid. The concentration of hormones are very low, and that the hormones are not released on a continual basis. And also, they can be affected by environmental factors or a negative feedback loop. In a very general sense, regulation of hormones occurs through a pathway similar to this. You should know this as though you have to reproduce it for specific hormones and glands. You'll see that the hypothalamus at the top releases a hormone that triggers the pituitary gland to release a tropic hormone to the target gland. Target gland produces a hormone that not only goes about its own job, but inhibits the release of hormone number 1 and hormone number 2 from the hypothalamus and pituitary glands, respectively. A more specific example of negative feedback regulation. The release of ADH is determined by the osmotic concentration of the blood. If the concentration is low, that is, a person is dehydrated, the hypothalamus osmoreceptors shrink. ADH is made by the hypothalamus, but neurosecretory cells channel the hormone to the posterior lobe of the pituitary. The shrinking osmoreceptors of the hypothalamus send a signal to the pituitary to release ADH to the bloodstream. The target cells are in the nephrons of the kidney, which responds by increasing water reabsorption and decreasing urine output. When osmotic pressure increases, the osmoreceptors of the hypothalamus swell and signals the pituitary to stop releasing ADH. A faulty regulation system can result in diabetes insipidus, where a person can produce unhealthy amounts of urine because of an inability to produce or release ADH. Generally, tropic hormones from the hypothalamus release tropic hormones from the anterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary hormones store and release non-tropic hormones manufactured by the hypothalamus. Anterior pituitary hormones are all tropic hormones released upon detection of a hypothalamic releasing tropic hormone. Tropic hormones are hormones that target the cells of other endocrine glands. When receptors of the tropic glands hold a sufficient concentration of the target hormone, the tropic glands stop production of the tropic hormones. Receptors for the hormone in question can be found on either or both of the hypothalamus and pituitary glands.